Hello friends, today I will tell you some of the most disturbing stories on Reddit. Let's enjoy today's story. I've always been curious about the dark web. Most people avoid it, and for good reason, but I thought it was all just a bunch of urban legends. I'd heard about the so-called red rooms, live-streamed torture sites where the worst of humanity is put on display for twisted people to watch. I never believed they were real until I saw one. One night, I was browsing through forums on the dark web, checking out random chat rooms and message boards. Out of nowhere, someone messaged me a link with the words, "Not for the faint-hearted." Against my better judgment, I clicked. It took me to a blank page with just a video player in the center, no description, no title. Then the video started. At first, it was just darkness. Then a dim light flickered on, and I could see a small, dirty room, brick walls, bare concrete floor, and a single chair bolted to the ground in the center. A man was tied to the chair, his hands bound, head slumped forward. He looked like he'd been there for days. Bruises covered his face, and blood trickled down from cuts on his arms. My heart started racing. This couldn't be real, right? But the longer I watched, the more I knew it was. The camera zoomed in, and I could hear the man breathing heavily, almost whimpering. His eyes were wide with terror, darting around the room as if looking for someone, something. And then I heard it, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the room. A figure appeared on the screen, wearing a black mask and a long coat. He held something shiny in his hand. As he got closer, I realized it was a knife. The man in the chair started screaming, begging for mercy. I wanted to look away, but it was like I was frozen, watching in horror. The masked man didn't speak. He just circled his victim, running the blade lightly across the man's skin, taunting him. Then, without warning, he plunged the knife into the man's shoulder. The man's screams were so loud I had to turn down the volume, but I still couldn't look away. The torturer took his time, cutting and slicing, moving in methodically. The entire time, the victim was sobbing, begging, but no one was coming to save him. The torturer seemed to enjoy it, like he was putting on a show. Every time the man screamed, the torturer would pause, waiting for him to calm down, only to start again. And then, he looked at the camera. Right at me. He tilted his head, almost like he could see me. My heart stopped. I felt like he knew I was watching, that he could reach through the screen and pull me in. Just then, a message popped up on the screen. Enjoying the show? I couldn't type back. I tried to close the tab, but my computer froze. Another message appeared. Leaving already? You're part of the audience now. Panic surged through me. I yanked the power cord, shutting everything down. I sat in silence, breathing heavily, trying to convince myself it was over. But my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number with a single image, a screenshot of my face, taken right then. Below it were the words, "You're next." I don't go online at night anymore, and I never, ever open strange links. But every so often, I'll get a random text with a video link. I delete it immediately, but I know they're out there, waiting, watching. And one day, they might come for me just like they did for him. Here is the second story. I stumbled onto the dark web by accident. I thought I was safe with a VPN and some basic knowledge of what not to click. But one night, I found a link labeled Rare Auction Access, and curiosity got the better of me. I'd heard about dark web auctions before, but this one wasn't like the others. It was called the Dollmaker's Auction. When the page loaded, I was greeted with a countdown timer and a list of lots, each with its own twisted description. These weren't items. They were people. And they were labeled as dolls. Each doll had a starting bid, along with details about what made them unique. The descriptions talked about their compliance levels, pain tolerance, and special modifications. The highest bids were on dolls marked enhanced, and I didn't want to imagine what that meant. But the worst part? Each lot had a small preview image, showing the person, usually tied up or drugged, eyes wide with terror. The auction started, and I watched as the bids poured in, skyrocketing in seconds. Then, a new doll was listed. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s. She had bruises on her face, and her eyes were red from crying. Her description read, "Perfect for the Dollmakers collection." I had no idea what that meant, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was worse than anything I'd seen so far. Suddenly, a live video feed popped up at the top of the page. The woman was in a small, dimly lit room, tied to a chair, staring straight into the camera. She was screaming, begging for help. Then, a figure walked into the frame, tall, wearing a mask that looked like a doll's face, with empty black eyes and a painted-on smile. The dollmaker. He stood behind her, running his gloved hands over her shoulders like he was admiring his work. She tried to pull away, but she was bound too tightly. He picked up a tool, some kind of scalpel, and started tracing it along her skin, mumbling something about making her perfect. I felt sick, but I couldn't look away. I was trapped, watching as he started his modifications. He sliced, carved, transforming her into what he called a true doll. Her screams echoed in my head long after the video ended, long after I'd shut down my computer. I thought it was over. I thought I could just forget. But the next day, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. Inside was a single image, a close-up photo of the dollmaker's mask. The subject line read, "You're invited to the dollmaker's next auction." I deleted it, but the emails kept coming. Each one had a new photo, each one closer to my home. I tried moving, changing my IP, but nothing worked. They always found me. Now, every time I hear a knock on my door, I freeze, terrified that it's him. I know it's only a matter of time before he decides it's my turn to join his collection. Here is the third story. I'm not one to mess with weird stuff online, but this? I'll never forget what happened. It's a warning. If you're ever tempted to dive deep into the dark web, maybe just don't. It all started when I was looking into some conspiracy theories for fun. You know, the usual stuff, secret societies, government cover-ups, weird symbols that keep popping up everywhere. I've always been curious and, honestly, a little too adventurous for my good. That's probably why I even ended up on the dark web in the first place. I was going down this rabbit hole late one night, reading about the Illuminati and all these rumors that they have hidden files on the dark web. I thought, no way. There's no chance something like that would be out there for just anyone to find, right? But my curiosity got the best of me. So, I started browsing around. I had my VPN on, I was being careful, but there's only so careful you can be when you're poking around on the dark web. Most of what I found was nonsense. Random chat rooms, creepy forums, and scam sites pretending to sell classified information. But after a couple of hours, I stumbled upon this link. It didn't have a description, just a bunch of random numbers and letters. Something about it felt off, but I clicked it anyway. It took me to a simple black page with a single message in white text. It said, "You have entered the inner circle. Proceed with caution." I almost laughed. It sounded like some bad movie dialogue. But before I could back out, another message popped up. "Curiosity can be deadly." My stomach dropped. I'd barely started exploring, and already I was getting warnings? But I couldn't stop now. I kept clicking through page after page, each one filled with bizarre symbols, strange chants, and these names of people I'd never heard of. It was like reading some kind of coded document. Finally, I hit a page that looked different. It was a list of files labeled with dates. Some of them were really recent, like within the past month. I knew I was probably making a huge mistake, but I clicked one of the recent ones. A loading icon spun for what felt like forever, and then it opened. Inside was a video. The quality was terrible, but I could make out a dimly lit room with a group of people in dark robes, standing around a symbol on the floor. They weren't saying anything, just standing there, facing the camera. Suddenly, one of them lifted their head and looked straight at me. I don't know how, but it felt like he was actually staring at me through the screen, like he knew I was watching. The figure raised his hand and pointed directly at the camera. Then, the screen cut to black and a message appeared, "You've seen too much. Disconnect immediately." I tried to exit, but my screen froze. My mouse wouldn't move, my keyboard wasn't working. I was stuck. That's when my phone started buzzing. It was an unknown number calling me over and over. My heart was racing, and I finally yanked my laptop's power cord out of the wall. My screen went dark, and so did my room. But my phone kept buzzing. I didn't answer it, but I checked my messages, and there was one text, just one. It said, "Stop looking." I tossed my phone on my bed, freaking out. My laptop was dead, but I didn't want to risk turning it back on, so I left it off and tried to sleep, though that was impossible. Every sound, every shadow outside my window, I was sure someone was watching me. The next morning, I turned my phone back on, and all my messages and missed calls were gone. There was no record of the text, no calls, nothing. I thought maybe I'd dreamed it, but when I powered up my laptop, it wouldn't load past a black screen. I tried taking it to a repair shop, but they couldn't find anything wrong with it, said it was like it had been wiped clean. That's when I really started panicking. Over the next few weeks, I kept noticing things. I'd see people lingering outside my apartment, watching. Strange cars would follow me for blocks. And every night, I'd get these calls from unknown numbers, with no one ever on the other line. One night I picked up, and this deep voice just whispered, "One more warning. Stop looking." I'd had enough. I shut down everything, deleted my online accounts, got a new phone, and even moved to a different place a few towns over. But every once in a while, I still get these weird texts or see a shadowy figure watching me from across the street. I don't know if they'll ever stop. And if you're thinking of looking into the Illuminati or diving into the dark web, maybe think twice. Thanks for listening. Take care, everyone.